We're here today to talk about the different kinds of DPF systems commonly fitted to vehicles. But before we do, let's just have a quick recap about DPFs, diesel particulate filters. As we've mentioned earlier, it's simply a device fitted to the vehicle to meet Euro legislations that contains and periodically burns away particulate matter and converts it into CO2. But what is particulate matter? Well, it's actually the unburnt fuel from the combustion process on the vehicle. It's really tiny. It's called PM10 down to PM2.5 size. So it's about the fifth the size of a human hair. Also, we need to consider regeneration. This can happen in both a passive nature or an active nature, depending on exhaust gas temperature. And finally, just a reminder that the DPF was introduced to suit Euro 5 emissions standards, where particulate matter had to be controlled to a much tighter level for the introduction of this 2009 series, down to 0.05 parts per million. So now let's talk about the different systems available on different manufacturers of vehicles. First of all, I'd like to talk about thermal systems, and we'll particularly pay attention to this BMW 5 Series 2008 model E60, so 520 diesel. You can see from the diagram on the screen there that the catalytic converter and the DPF are completely separate units here. The catalytic converter is mounted nice and close to the exhaust manifold on the engine, so it remains at high exhaust gas temperature, but the DPF is actually located underneath the gear stick region of the vehicle, in the middle of the vehicle. So how's it going to regenerate? Well, it relies upon high exhaust gas temperature. So we want to be using this vehicle. It's a motorway vehicle. It's going to be going up and down, typically 300-400, which supports passive regeneration. If that's not happening and we get to a fill level where regeneration has to be done actively, fuel will be added into the exhaust gas stream to enable a combustion process to take place. But to support the passive regen, it's likely these DPFs are going to have a high amount of platinum loading on them. This actually supports the conversion of particulate matter into CO2. It's a good point to remember that replacing this sort of DPF with a type approved device is highly recommended to ensure that there's a platinum coating on there as well. So let's talk about a different thermal system. Volkswagen have come up with a very innovative solution to the problem. First of all, they've combined the separate catalytic converter and DPF into one complete unit. They've done away with the catalyst brick and kept the DPF brick, but it's what's called zonal loaded. So the front half of the DPF brick, which is generally empty, now has a precious metal coating and is acting as the catalytic converter. So that's a mixture of platinum, palladium and rhodium. And then the back half of the DPF brick is actually doing the function of the DPF, containing and periodically burning away the particulate matter. So I'd call this a zonal loaded DPF, and it's used commonly across many of the VW platforms. Particulate matter is burned away easily using temperature, so it's located nice and close to the turbo manifold, but without any additive system. Finally, we'll talk about probably one of the most commonly faulty systems on vehicles. It's the additive system. This is where a separate catalyst and DPF are used. But additionally, there's a reservoir with a fuel-borne catalyst that has to be added. It's in a separate tank and is periodically injected during driving. So what does it do? Well, it actively lowers the combustion temperature required for regeneration. So it can support passive regeneration, and so it can make active regeneration occur at lower exhaust gas temperatures. This additive is stored in a separate reservoir or tank, but it needs to be replaced periodically. It's around 3 litres. It tends to last between 60 and 75,000 miles. But at this point, if it runs out, the vehicle won't be able to regenerate, and very quickly the DPF can fail. So normally this is when a garage would be alerted to the system needing replenishment at the same time as the DPF needs replacement. But the fluid actually becomes a service item. It's very commonly used on the PSA group engines, so they're seen in such vehicles as the BMW Mini, Peugeot, Citroën, Volvo, Mazda, and in fact some of the VW, Skoda and Lancia families. Let's take a look at this example. This is off a Peugeot 407, and we can see the catalytic converter brick up at the front, and in the same assembly we can see the DPF brick at the back. You'll see on the schematic on the screen some of the common features. So we've got the pressure pipes both fore and aft, so we can start to measure the pressure differential across the brick. We've got temperature sensors, and on the vehicle elsewhere are things like the oxygen sensors, the ECU in the control unit. All of these different items and components help to manage the DPF system. Additionally, on these additive systems, we've got the reservoir where the additive itself is kept. This needs to be periodically pumped into the fuel tank. This goes through an additive filter and through a pump and is periodically dosed. They're the additional components over and above the normal DPF pieces. Well, let's talk a little bit about the PAT fluid. You'll hear different names actually. There's PAT fluid, Eloy's fluid. Eloy's is the original equipment brand name. The system capacity, well, it's about 3 litres. It depends which vehicle you've got, but generally they're around 3 litre capacity. And the replenishment can either be done through buying original equipment fluid, or you can buy an aftermarket alternative. So let's talk about the aftermarket fluid. It's available in 1 litre and 5 litre tubs. What you must always remember is this is a universal aftermarket fluid, one-stop shop. So one brand does every single original equipment manufacturer specification that there is. So it's suitable for all vehicle applications, both light commercial as well as passenger car from 2000 or newer. And it's basically a low-cost, fuel-borne catalyst. It aids regeneration in the DPF filter, it lowers the combustion temperature of soot buildup, and it enables quicker burn-off of soot particles for passive regen. So we'll talk a little bit now about replenishment. Replenishment can be done either on or off the vehicle. It must be done with the fitting kit, the pipe and the little connections that are needed to go from the reservoir decanter into the reservoir itself. You always must fill from a 1 litre container. So generally, if you're going to replace around 3 litres of fluid, you decant from the 5 litres into 1 litre and then into the reservoir tank, and you repeat that exercise 3 times in a row. Filling is normally on demand, so that could be either as a service interval item. If the vehicle owners come in at say 60, 70, 80,000 miles, it's a good time to check and replenish this fluid. If not, it's done on demand of failure. If the DPF has failed due to lack of fluid on the vehicle, where the DPF can't regenerate and becomes blocked, not only will you need to replace the DPF, you'll have to replenish this fluid as well at the same time. And it can be done either on or off the vehicle, whether it's into the reservoir tank or reservoir bag, but always in conjunction with the filling kit. Well, let's talk about some of the common causes of lack of regen. I'm going to split these up now quite nicely into 2 families, whether that's either mechanically or down to poor servicing of the vehicle or user contributed issues. So first of all, let's talk about mechanical things. There's a number of items on the vehicle that, if either poorly maintained or leading to failure, will cause the vehicle to stop regenerating. If you're replacing a DPF, you should always diagnose and fix these issues at the same time. Some of the common ones, it could be a faulty or sticking EGR valve, it could be heater plugs or injectors or their control unit, it could be swirl flaps, it could be down to lack of PAT fluid on the vehicle, it could be faulty lambda sensors, faulty exhaust gas sensors, it could be down to a poor quality catalytic converter or DPF with particular lack of platinum on the DPF, it could be down to turbo issues, or it could be down to the pressure pipes. These could be cracked, perished, or blocked, or full of condensation. It could be down to the pressure differential switch. Also, look at servicing, look at the history of servicing on that vehicle. Has it been done on time? Has it been done using good quality components rather than cheap products? I'd also be interviewing the owner of the vehicle and trying to start to understand how they've used this vehicle. Driving style is really key to the DPF. We need high exhaust gas temperatures and we need regens to be taking place either passively or actively. If that's not able to happen through the driving style from the owner of the vehicle, the DPF can quickly become blocked. So some tips from me. Avoid short journeys. We need the engine to be going up to full operating temperatures to support passive regen. We need high exhaust gas temperature to be used. So if you're only going to be using the vehicle around the town, you might want to recommend to your customer to go for a 10 or 15 minute drive once every couple of weeks up the highway, maybe in 4th gear, and get to a reasonably high exhaust gas temperature. I'd also be asking about fuel quality. Have the correct fuels been used for the vehicle, particularly low sulfur fuels? When we're talking about servicing, we want to make sure the correct oils are used. Always use the manufacturer's recommended oils, but generally for DPFs, we need to use low ash engine oils. Ask them about the additive system. Have they ever had a replacement or replenishment of the fluid? I don't know if you're aware, but if the fuel tank is below around a quarter full, maybe around 20 litres, the DPF won't be able to regenerate. So if the vehicle owner is running the car particularly empty or never replenishing the fuel fully, this will stop regeneration happening as well. Thanks for listening. Hope you found that informative. Thank you.